Hi there and welcome to Unit 5. This is our ratios, rates, and proportions unit. We are going to be starting with this one. We'll be in this for a little while. We're going to kind of chunk it again into different pieces. We're going to start off talking about ratios and rates. So for today, lesson 5.1 is just ratios. We're going to be in your notes packet on pages 2 and 3. So 5.1 ratios, starting at the top of page number 2. Just to give you a little definition, some background, a ratio is a comparison of two quantities with the same unit. So their units are going to have to match in order for us to be able to compare them. The units will end up canceling out. So when we have our final answer, we'll just have numbers there. You can write a ratio in 3 different ways. You can write it out A to B using the word to. You can write it out and you would say this A to B, just like we said it here, but with a colon instead. Or you're able to go ahead and actually write it as a fraction as long as your B value on the bottom is not a 0. So one of the ways to remember that ratios are pretty easy. When you write your answers, they need to have the units cancel out. And the reason being, ratios are just fractions. And if you notice, that word ratios was here prior to us adding in those extra letters there. So ratios are just fractions. And what you can do is you can actually type them in using the fraction button on your calculator. And you will actually just use that to simplify them. So it's a pretty easy process here. Biggest step is to make sure that your units match. So examples here, write the ratio in simplest form. Make sure your units match before you actually reduce. I'm going to recommend that we rewrite all of our ratios as fractions first. So we'll cancel out our units to make sure that they're the same. And then we'll actually just reduce them and then we'll write them back in the original form that they were. So the first one, I see 8 centimeters to 16 centimeters. So I'm going to write down 8 centimeters over 16 centimeters. As long as the top and bottom labels match, these cancel out. It's kind of like centimeters divided by centimeters, and it's kind of like what we saw in our previous chapters with solving equations. 5 divided by 5 just cancel because you get 1. Centimeters divided by centimeters just cancel because you also get 1. So then all we do is we can type in our fraction 8 over 16 into our calculator, or you can just reduce it in your head if you realize this is 1/2. So our ratio here, we wrote it as a fraction. We're going to rewrite it using the colon. So I'm going to put an equal sign here, and we're going to write this as 1 to 2. So if those were two measurements we were comparing, they're in the ratio of 1 to 2. Question number 2, I'm going to write out 35 footballs. I'm just going to put foot if that's okay. Over 15 foot. Put a B at the end if you want to. And my units are the same, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel them out. If you are using your calculator to reduce here and you type in 35 over 15, you have to be careful because you are going to get a mixed number. We don't want that. We actually just need an improper fraction here so that we're able to still just have two numbers to compare, like we had over here, 1 to 2. So if you did use your calculator to simplify, you get your mixed number. You're going to actually have to use the shift and then the fraction function so that you can change it over to an improper fraction. Or you can just simplify using your factors. So we do get 7 over 3 here. Because it was written out with the word 2, I'm going to put 7 to 3. Example number 3, the first one we see here, this is the first time we have 50 seconds over 2 minutes, the first time that our labels don't actually match. What we're typically going to do is which one is smaller, a second or a minute? And because seconds are smaller and we don't have a whole minute here, we're going to actually have to change 2 minutes into seconds so that our labels actually match. So we're going to rewrite this as 50 seconds. That'll stay the same. 1 minute is 60 seconds, so 2 minutes would be 120 seconds. Now that our labels match, we can cancel them out and we can just reduce our remaining fraction. We get 5 over 12. We'll rewrite it with the colon as it originally was. So we're going to have 5 colon 12, 5 to 12. This next one, we do have inches over feet. Looking at this, inches, feet, the 32 inches cannot go into feet accurately. So I'm going to have you go ahead and change that over real quick here. And once you have it changed over, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and actually reduce as well. So we're going to change everything over to inches. So I'm going to have 32 inches. There's 12 inches in 1 foot. So 12 times 4 would be 48 inches. Our units now cancel. So if we have 32 over 48, that's actually going to reduce to be 2/3. Since it was written as a fraction, I'm going to leave that as my final answer here. So that's how you handle ratios. The table at the right shows the results of a survey. Write each of the ratios in simplest form. So we're going to be comparing tacos to pizza, tacos to total, pizza to the total. So I'm real quick just going to add these up. 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 tacos, 5, 10, 15, 16 pizzas, and 14 and 16 gives me a total of 30. So if I do that, I've kind of done some of the front work here. So my first ratio wants to be tacos to pizza. I'm going to just write them as fractions because it's going to be easier to compare it that way. So 14 to 16, reducing gives me 7 to 8, or I could write 7 to 8, or I could write 7 colon 8. Tacos to the total, so I have 14 tacos compared to the total of 30. Reducing that's going to give me 7 over 15, or I could write it as 7 to 15, or 7 colon 15. Take a minute, go ahead and write the ratio reduced for pizza to the total. Pizza has 16, the total is 30. Reducing that, you're going to end up getting 8 over 15, which you could have also written as 8 to 15 or 8 colon 15. Those are all your options there. Flip it on over to page number 3. We're going to do some applications here. We're going to do a we do problem, and then I'm going to have you try the you do problem. So pay attention to the we do because the you do kind of copies it just with some different numbers. So applications of ratios. Remember, ratios are just comparisons. They're fractions. In class, the ratio of blondes to brunettes is 5 to 7. If the total number of students in the class is 24, how many students are brunettes? So in our ratio here, we have 5 students are blondes, 7 are brunettes. That means we have a total of 12 students here. We are able to take this ratio and double it or triple it because it would still reduce back to 5 to 7. So what we have to do is figure out how many times we're actually multiplying it. So we're going to actually just write an equation here. And we're going to add 5x plus 7x. This represents the pieces of our ratio. And we want this to be equal to 24 total students. So we combine our like terms here. 5x plus 7x is 12x equals 24. Dividing through by 12, I get x is equal to 2. So it looks like we're going to be doubling our ratio. So the total number of students is 24. How many students are brunettes? So this was blondes was 5 to brunettes was 7. So this part of my equation right here, the 7x, represents the brunettes in the class. Since x is 2, I'm going to do 7 times 2, which will give me, so let's start it off, remember from 7x, went 7 times 2 because x was 2, so we get 14 brunettes in the class. Go ahead, take a minute, read over the you do here, and see if you can write the equation and figure out how many of the grades are A's. So A's to B's is 2 to 3, so we have 2x plus 3x, and our total number of grades is 20. Combining those, we get 5x equals 20. Dividing through by 5, we learn that x is 4. So it looks like we take that ratio and we multiply it by 4. We are looking particularly at the A's, which was the 2 part, or the 2x. So since I had 2x, I'm going to plug in x is 4, so I'm going to do 2 times 4, which tells me I have 8 A's for this class. Taking a look then at question number 8, this is another we do, you do. So this is another type of ratio question we can see. A vendor sold 64 hot dogs during a football game. If the ratio of hot dogs to hamburgers was 8 to 1, how many hamburgers did the vendor sell? So we're going to use kind of that similar method. So we're talking about hot dogs to burgers here. Ratio is 8 to 1. And we know that there were 64 hot dogs sold. So we're trying to figure out how many burgers were sold. If you remember just before, we were trying to use that x to figure out how many we're multiplying by to actually get here. Because we're working with ratios and ratios are fractions, we're only multiplying and dividing. So 8 times what is going to get us up to 64? Well, that's times 8. So I'm going to go ahead and have to do the same thing to the other side of the ratio. So that tells me that there were 8 burgers that were sold by the vendor then. You're going to go ahead and take a look at this one. Jack's birthday party, the ratio of adults to kids was 3 to 1. There were a total of 12 adults, so how many kids were there? So go ahead, take a minute, follow those same steps, and figure out how many kids. So adults to kids was 3 to 1. We know there were 12 adults, and we're going to try and figure out how many kids. 3 times what gets us to 12? That's times 4. So over here, we're going to multiply by 4, and there were 4 kids at the party. And that is it for lesson 5.1 with learning about ratios. Remember, ratios are just fractions.